Good afternoon. My name is Menachem Butler, and I'm the president of the Institute for Jewish Research and Publications. And on behalf of the Ginzenis Tarot Society, we are pleased to welcome everyone to our book launch this afternoon. And we are celebrating the newly published volume by Professor Tzvi Langerman. The title of the volume is Haperek al Dine Yom Kippurim, the chapter on the Laws of Yom Kippur, from Issur ve-Heter, an early and comprehensive book of halacha, source, translation, and notes. Copies are available for purchase at Amazon.com. My copy should be arriving within the next half hour. And if you order soon, if you order quickly, you too can receive your copy before Yom Kippur this week. We are honored that Professor Langerman is available to share some thoughts about the book, the specific booklet that we published for Yom Kippur, as well as the overall project of what he has been working on for the past number of years. And please God, in good health, he should continue to work on this project and other projects as well for many years to come. Professor Langerman, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Menachem. I'll begin by just giving you some background on how I got involved in this. My doctorate and my specialty, or my original specialty, was history of science. But when I joined the Institute of Microfilm to Hebrew Manuscripts in Jerusalem, sometime in the early 1980s, they had begun a project of producing a book of corrections and updates to Neubauer's catalog of Hebrew manuscripts. You can see here on the slide the description of the manuscripts I'm about to talk about. I'm working on the manuscript that has the one of the two manuscripts that has the text of Issur ve-Heter. This catalog is 100 years old or more or less, and it's cataloging the thousands of manuscripts in a collection such at the Bodley in Oxford is a big undertaking, and the person who does it can't be expected to know everything, and the available research to learn about these texts was not available, had not yet been published. So the people at Oxford decided they would put out this edition, this new book with additions and corrections, and they would contract us, being the place where the manuscript experts reside, to do it for them. Now, being an historian of science and historian of philosophy and Jewish thought, so I first took on cataloging the texts in astronomy and mathematics and medicine and so on. But since I was the only one on the staff who read Arabic, I later took on doing the Judeo-Arabic text. And that's when I came across this particular text. If you could put the page from Neubauer on again. So I was struck by the fact that this was a fairly large and comprehensive book on halakha, which seems to be very early. Now, how do we know how early it is? Well, if you're lucky, you'll have an introduction by the author in which the author tells you, where he wrote and when he wrote the book. But sometimes they're not that generous with this information, or in the present case, we don't have the very beginning. So the standard procedure is to, see, well, who are the people and books that are mentioned, and which is the latest one, and that gives you a sort of a limit, the bottom limit. It can't be any earlier than this. For example, if he mentions the Rif and this Rabbi Yosef, I'll come back to it in a minute. He can't be any earlier than them. Then how do we know how late it is? Well, two things argued for not being very late. One, that it's written in Judeo-Arabic, because around the time of the 12th century, around the time of the Almohad invasions, the one that eventually forced Maimonides and his family to leave Spain, that's pretty much the end of the the flowering of Judeo-Arabic culture in Spain and North Africa, though they continued to write in Arabic into the 14th century. But especially because of the fact that he doesn't cite the Rambam Mishnah Torah. And I would expect, and I think it's a fact that all comprehensive works on halacha subsequent to Maimonides' Mishnah Torah refer to him. So if he's somewhere in between Rabbi Yosef, which is certainly between Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi, who is certainly mentioned there by name and is cited often with the Rif without being named, and the certain Rabbi Yosef Ruach Hashem Tenichenu, meaning he was already nifter, he was no longer living. Between these two and the publication of the Maimonides Mishnah Torah means that this text must have been written sometime in the second half of the 12th century. Now, I suspect, though I can't prove it completely now, that the Rabbi Yosef Ruach Hashem Tenichenu is Rabbi Yosef ibn Migash, who succeeded the Rif as the head of the yeshiva, and who was I don't know if it's a colleague, but whose students were the ones who suffered the most in the Almohad persecutions, which put an end to the yeshiva in Hussein and other yeshivot. And at the time that I was working on this, Professor Toshma Zichron Levracha was the head of the Microfilm Institute. He told me that this text must be very important because that's a lost generation. The generation after Rabbi Yosef ibn Migash was a generation which was pretty much wiped out in the persecutions of the Muwahidun, and we have very little left of it. So this got me excited, and I decided that I would, put this aside for something to work on as a, as I was able to free myself up. I was, then teaching and had projects in history of science and a family and getting children and all that. But after a long time, I got back to working on this text, and I've been publishing individual chapters, trying to split it up between academic journals such as Miketze Nerdamim and Pe'amim and Torani, for lack of a better word, journals such as Chitze Giborim, and also this brand new journal, which is sort of both, Mechilta, put out by some students in the Department of Talmud at the Hebrew University, because I think that these divisions are artificial, and I want to be able to produce a work that will be, acceptable to both camps. So that's what I've been doing, and so basically this is it's a comprehensive book on halakha that dates to the second half of the 12th century. I fairly early on came to the supposition that it was written in Spain, or was now Spain. At that time, there was no country Spain. There was the Iberian Peninsula in the sort of the northeastern quadrant, where people were still speaking Arabic. Jewish communities were still speaking Arabic, but were close enough to the communities in the Christian lands, particularly Barcelona, that they would have access to some Hebrew texts. And there is one Hebrew text which is put in word for word on liquor, on porging animals after they're slaughtered, but also the imprint of Amram Gaon, who, though he was a Babylonian Gaon, his Siddur was actually, I think, written for the communities in that area, and eventually also found the strong imprint of Rabbi Yehuda Barceloni and Sefer Itim, a big important scholar from Barcelona. And then in the chapter that's in this new booklet that I've just published with Menachem's Institute, I have found evidence that he can be located to Toledo and the inversions, and that makes a lot of sense because Toledo, on the one hand, was reconquered by the Christians in the 11th century. On the other hand, so it would have had been easy access to, part of the Christian part in that time was limited to northern Spain and northeastern Spain. On the other hand, the community in Toledo continued to write in Judeo-Arabic for hundreds of years, well into the 14th century. Now, the evidence that it's from Toledo comes from an interesting minhag. One of the unusual features that's listed in this chapter. We know that in Ma'ariv, in the Tfilat Arvit, evening prayer, there are two brachot, two blessings before Kriyat Shema, and two brachot after Kriyat Shema. But there are places where you say you add a fifth blessing, a third blessing after Kriyat Shema before Shmona Esrei, which begins Yeru Einenu Yismach Libeinu. And there was a custom in some places in Spain to say this fifth bracha as well on Shabbos, on holidays, including Yom Kippur, but they didn't begin it with Yeru Einenu, but with the pasuk Yisbechu Hashem Tagil Haaretz. Now, the Tur, that's the son of the Rosh, who came to become the Ashkenazi rabbi of the Spanish city of Toledo in the 14th century, lists this as a minhag which is wrong. Which the Torah he gives a psak halacha that what they do in Toledo by saying this fifth bracha is wrong. But for me, this was an important clue that my book, the book that I'm working on, Issur ve-Heter, must come from that era because he endorses it. And in the course of doing this research, I also found a machzor from Spain, which also lists that prayer for Yom Kippur, and which therefore may also be may preserve Minhag Toledo. And this is also an interesting sort of side or a bonus of my research, because what we call today Minhag Sfarad didn't begin until the Jews were not in Sfarad. It was only after the expulsion from Spain that the Jews from all the different communities, from Toledo, Saragossa, Lucena, Granada, Cordoba, and so on, were all put in the same boat and shipped to Italy and to the Balkans and then into Syria, Damascus, Chalab, and Jerusalem. And there they sort of evolved a communal nusach. But before that time, there was no such thing. There were just individual customs which differed apparently significantly in the major centers. So this helps place the text in its geographical locale of Toledo. Now, two other points in general about the text, and then I'll show some pages from the manuscript, and then we'll see if there are any questions. One is that it's interesting that not only does this text, in my understanding and my study, fit chronologically between the Gaonim and including the early authorities in Spain and North Africa, who published monographs or collected tshuvot or machzorim, and the Rambam fits in chronologically, but also sort of in terms of literary evolution, meaning that though this book is a unified treatise and there are cross references, he will say, for the details of the Havdalah, go to my chapter on Havdalah or on Shabbat, but it does not impose a unified style and organization on all of the different chapters the way the Rambam did in the Mishnah Torah. So, for example, they say the chapter on Yom Kippur, he begins by talking about the prayers, the Seder Tefillot, and here he follows the style of the Siddur Rasag, Siddur Rambam Gaon, and others that tell you what prayers that be said, but also include certain halachot concerning the Tefillot. And then when he moves on to talk about the halachot, he will sometimes follow the order of the Mishnayot, and the book will then reflect the earliest commentaries on the Mishnah, or giving other Piskei Halacha. So we see here that even though he's sort of put all these diverse topics together, from Seder Moed, from Seder Zeraim, and from Chulin, he has not put it all together to the extent of having a book with a unified style. Now, another thing that I've done in my more recent studies of this book, including this text, including the book that's just come out, and which I hope to continue to do, is to take advantage of some of the wonderful resources on the internet that people, some generous donors and some hardworking scholars have made available. And I'm not sure how much they're actually being used by scholars. Many times he will quote what looks to be he's quoting the Gemara. He will just say in Arabic, "Huwa qawluhum zal." This is what they zal said, and then the quote comes in Hebrew or in Aramaic, so it's obviously a quote, not the author's own words. Sometimes it fits the printed, the Shas Vilna perfectly, but often it differs, sometimes significantly. And there is a website called Hachi Garsina. It's actually it's on the Friedberg Geniza Society website, which gives you in a synoptic form, that's in parallel columns, all the available manuscripts, Geniza fragments, and early lithographic printings and cunabulae of the Talmud. So you can identify the citation and look to see if the exact nusach of the Issur ve-Heter is mirrored, is found in one of these other sources. And in fact, I've been successful in a number of places, very often in finding that he's following a certain manuscript or text, but in particular in this chapter on Yom Kippur, we have for Masechet Yuma an incunabulum, there's a book printed before the year 1500 in Guadalajara, Spain, and they include that printing's nusach in Hachi Garsina, and in one case, it is exactly the quote that the Mitzvah ve-Heter brings, which is not the same anywhere else. So it's an interesting confirmation of this being a Spanish nusach. So okay, now these are general remarks. Oh, someone wanted to know about the Bahag and halachot Pesukot and the Rif. Well, I already said the Rif is an important source. Rif is cited often, and in fact, I think that these quotations that I say, he just says, this is what they said. Sometimes he'll bring the Rif instead of the Gemara, and that is actually not surprising at this point in time, that the Rif would have the same status as the Gemara. I think the Rambam also, Maimonides, looked at the Rif almost with that sort of reverence. Bahag and halachot Pesukot are not cited by name as far as I know, but they're obviously the first place to go to for comparison, particularly if there's a odd ruling or text. And I've done this almost in every case where I couldn't find another source for the precise wording, and sometimes I find it in Bahag. Bahag, as those of you know, is a very complicated textual history, and with the people who've invested their lives in it, and defend their views with what you might expect. So I just I use the Hildesheimer and occasionally other versions, and I do find that it has some footprint in this text. Now, just to show you, there are two manuscripts of ve-Heter. You put up the table of contents. Yeah, so this is the opening page of the Oxford manuscript, and you can see, if you're that the first line is in English or in Latin. Robertus Huntington. Robert Huntington was a Englishman who traveled to mostly Syria and Eretz Yisrael, but mostly Syria, buying manuscripts and brought them back. I don't recall if he donated them or sold them to Oxford, but we have I don't know exactly when he lived. I didn't bother to check for it, but there were quite a few. There were a number of people from England and Holland and other places who traveled around the Middle East collecting manuscripts for scholarly and commercial reasons. But it's a good thing because it wound up in Oxford, and that's a safe place to be if you're an old manuscript. And it begins, if you read the first line here, Al Juzul Thani min Issur ve-Heter, part 2 of Issur ve-Heter. This is where I got the title from. Someone could argue that that's the title of this section, though actually Issur ve-Heter would be the science, would not be that appropriate for a section that deals mostly with the holidays. So I think it's probably the title of the whole book. And it was just only the second part. And then we have the chapters. This is what Judeo-Arabic looks like with a combination of Hebrew. It's like, if you know in Yiddish, where you can go back and forth between Hebrew and Yiddish without switching alphabets. And then, if Menachem, if you could give the one that says from the one from Yom Kippur.
The sample page or the first page?
No, other one. The one that says.
Yep.
Okay, so here we have, if over here on the right hand side, in the middle of the page, you can see the big letters Al Fasl Al Kafeh. That's chapter Kaf Dalet, chapter 24. Nazkor fihi rutbat Yom Kippur wala wazimia. We will mention here the rutbah, the seder, the order of prayers, and the lawazim, the chovot, the sort of the normative minhag. And then you see here Arvit, Yotzer, meaning the Shacharit, and he's bringing here, as I said earlier, the prayers that are said along with some laws. There is one other manuscript, and that's what's labeled sample page. Yeah. Now, in the, I forget when it was, mid to late 80s, when the doors to the former Soviet Union opened up, and finally we had access to the thousands of critically important manuscripts that are found mainly in St. Petersburg, but also in Moscow. And there was a deal struck to get the films to Jerusalem. So you can imagine that how exciting this was, and I took advantage as much as I could, and I found there another large chunks of it, actually several chunks, because the Soviet librarians had taken several books and bound them together. They, if I correctly, realized that they all belong to this same book. And this is actually another copy of Issur ve-Heter. It overlaps somewhat, but it has a lot of chapters that are missing in the Oxford manuscript. So it's a welcome supplement. Here you see here in the big letters in the sort of little beyond the middle of the page, Al-Fasl al-Mim Zayin, chapter 47, Kilei Karen, the Harkavat Ilan, the Kilayim, the laws. These are laws of agriculture that have to do with viniculture and fruit growing. And actually, it has a chapter of its own, because Jews in Spain were very active in this, and it actually has an odd ruling ascribed to Rav Amram for except for burning the kilayim. Or I published this chapter in Pe'amim, and there's a footnote towards the end of the introduction. I have a bibliography of all the chapters that I put out already. So we have these two fairly good-sized chunks with some overlap. Fortunately, the two manuscripts are both written in a professional hand. This is what we call a professional hand, not some individual scribbling to himself, but someone who's made with like a fair copy, and they're pretty accurate. I have very little emendations to suggest, and these are the manuscripts that I'm working with now. Just like to finish up by mentioning some of the. I mentioned two important things that the chapter on Yom Kippur contributes to the understanding of the text. One is locating the author in the area of Toledo, and the other is having his gersa, at least in some places, the same as the Guadalajara incunabulum, and the custom of saying 5 brachot in Mariv, which is soundly rejected by the Torah. One more other interesting thing, which actually again goes to reinforce what I said earlier about the fact that he's not imposed a unified style on the text. He also hasn't imposed a unified halakha. This is the one place where I found an internal contradiction in the first section of the chapter, which follows the siddur, the machzor for Yom Kippur. It ends, of course, with Havdalah, and at the end of Mariv, and it follows, what as far as I know, all Jewish communities do today, which is to have you blow shofar after Mariv, or before, or even before Mariv, but you blow shofar in shul, and then you go home and make Havdalah over a cup of wine. But in the second part, which is the halakha part, he says that the proper procedure is to make Havdalah over wine and then to blow shofar, which as far as I know, no one does in these days in Yom Kippur. And I found that this also is found in that same machzor from Sephardi machzor found in Firenze now, in Florence, So this is another odd ruling, which we hadn't known about, and perhaps it also, if as a side product of this particular research project, I've identified Machzor that's Machzor Toledo, then that's a nice bonus. So that's basically the story of Issur ve-Heter in general, and some of the chidushim that are in the chapter on Yom Kippur.
Thank you, Professor Langerman. You mentioned that obviously this is a chapter of this larger project of yours. And also you mentioned that there are two manuscripts, one which has the latter includes sections not in the former. Taken all together, how many chapters are there in your eventual project of when completed, assuming there aren't additional manuscripts found? How many chapters are there? And
I don't remember I don't remember by heart. I have all the chapter titles in the book, but they're probably 30, 40, something like that. They range over holidays, agricultural laws, Chulin. There's a chapter on Nikur. They range over tefillot and brachot. No dine momonos, no Ebenezer, and no Choshen Mishpat. So it covers a rather wide swath of halacha in these areas, and the whole thing together, two manuscripts, takes up what does a Neubauer thing say there? How many folios? I don't remember. Over 100, 130. And so it's quite a big thing for the, it's quite a big it's quite a substantial chunk of the book.
And have you found any indication that this work was known by others since its completion?
Or implicit traces as well as explicit quotations.
Okay, there are no explicit quotations, and it's not surprising because how much halakhic writing was there after the time of the Rambam in Arabic of this sort. But I did find, and as I point this out, that the Rambam's son, Rabbi Avraham, in his Kifayat al-Abedin, his book, which is it's famous for its ethics, for its Sufi ethics, but it has chapters on Hilchot Tzitzit, Hilchot Tefillin, Hilchot Tefillah, where he has some of his, revolutionary, controversial innovations, but he says there that, I'm not going to go into all the halachot on this topic, Tzitzit, Tefillin. You can go to some of the large books that are on halacha, and if you want a comprehensive treatment. Now, since he's right, the Rambam's son chose to write in Arabic after his father published Mishnah Torah in Hebrew, but he's putting a halachic book out in Arabic, and so I assume that the Arabic books he's referring to, the books he's referring to are also in Arabic because that's his readership. And the only other comprehensive halachic book in Arabic that we have, other than Issur ve-Heter, is a book that David Skler has written about, but which survives only in fragmentary form. So I think there's a good chance that the Rambam's son may have been referring to this book, because what else could he refer to when he's telling an Arabic reading public to look for the full details somewhere else? Then
that would mean that's certain manuscripts got from Toledo to Egypt, which indicates that some people were interested in the work.
Yeah, that would mean that he knew about it. The thing is though that that's not that surprising insofar as if I don't know, I mean the Maimonidean family, certainly the Rambam himself, maybe Rambam less, was always giving pride of place to works coming out of Spain in all fields, philosophy, medicine, Pashnut Mikra. So it's possible that they would have, somehow made an effort to keep in touch and had received it. But it's possible, again, as you said, that it made it to Egypt. The only two copies are in a Sephardi hand, but they are found in the East. I mean, Huntington bought his books in mostly, I think, in Damascus. I don't know if, or Chalab in Aleppo, and the St. Petersburg was taken by Firkovich, I guess, somewhere. So they both found their way to the Egypt or the Middle East, and remained there for some time. So they had made it to Egypt and even points further east. Now there is a marginal note in this text that does refer to the Rambam. It says something like the Rambam. This doesn't agree with the Rambam. I forget exactly what, but this can't be from the author. And so someone had read it and made a note. But I think that, again,
Could it be Yosef? Could it be Yosef ben Yehuda?
Who wrote the book?
No, who wrote that note?
I don't know his hand, and I don't know that Yosef ben Yehuda had a.
He did go to Aleppo and he started teaching halacha. So, and he was
I don't know. I think the Rambam tried in a gentle way to tell him that he shouldn't get involved in that. So you can understand it as you want, but
the Rambam did not want that the Mishnah Torah should be interpreted to the world by Yosef ben Yehuda.
Okay, all right, okay, but yeah, and also I can tell you, I don't want to go too often.
He was still teaching. He was still teaching, and he might have.
It's possible, but we don't have any halachic works of his. We just have this. We just know that he was criticizing Shmuel ben Eli, and the Rambam was telling him, don't pick a fight if you don't have to. So Shmuel ben Eli was critical of the Rambam on halachic issues as well. So, but even so, even in those places, I think that I mean, even we have, as far as I know, outside of the Yemen, we have one, maybe two commentaries on. We have one big commentary in Arabic on Sefer. One of the books of Mishnah Torah, which is unstudied. I had a student who started to work on it and never got very far. And it's in Oxford as well. So that's halachic writing on the Mishnah Torah. Then we have the famous one by that is the fifth generation guy. He took to Aleppo. This is the one on the first parts of Sefer Madah. That was written actually by a non-Jew, or was copied by a non-Jew, that is full of references to Ibn Sina and Ibn Kamuna and all these other people, and but that's all philosophy pretty much, no halacha. But in terms of halacha, I think they were using the Rambam. So there was the readership for halakhic works in Arabic was not great. I mean, even the Rabbi Abraham's Kifayat al-Abedin is mostly lost, and there aren't many manuscripts. So I assume he must have known that there were people who were interested in reading this in Arabic, but it didn't really, carry on. It's only in Yemen where it was like a sustained interest into the 20th century in writing halakha in Arabic.
You mentioned how this has been a project of yours on and off for the past 40 or so years. I believe it's in your article of Issur ve-Heter on Shavuot that you share an anecdote with your late teacher, Harav Kapach. I was wondering if you would be able to share. It's not related to Yom Kippur, but the overall project.
It's an anecdote that got me into some hot water, which I know I got out of when I was working at the Microfilm Institute and going over these manuscripts. I was also studying with Rav Kapach. I studied with him for 20 years, going to his twice a week to his shiurim, and I would sometimes copy things out and bring them to him to see, show him that it looked interesting. And I was such a just devoted, but I don't know what word to use, student, that I didn't keep a record for myself of what I had given to him or where it came from. So I copied out. There is a tshuva that's cited in this in the chapter in Shavuot on the question of what to do if you forget a day counting the Omer. And I gave it to him, and I forgot about it. And then, at least 10 years after that, he put out his Mishnah Torah with the and when he got to that item in the Mishnah Torah on what you do if you forgot to count the Omer, he said, and I have a tshuva which I'm sure is authentic, Rambam an authentic tshuva of Maimonides on this, that was brought to me by Tzvi Langerman in manuscript number 500 at the Institute. And he showed it to me and he said, I didn't remember, I didn't know the number, so I put down 500. So, and then people started coming to me and said, can I see that? Where'd you get this from? And I said, I didn't know. I completely forgotten about it. And I was looking everywhere I could think of, and I couldn't find. Finally, I located it in Issur ve-Heter. So it's not Rambam, but it's pre-Rambam, and so I said, the nafka mina is not that great, because if this is a Spanish authority pre-Rambam citing from some Gaon or some, then it's very likely something that the Rambam, a tradition that the Rambam would have, bought into. But it got me into, I was getting every year, when it rolled around to the time of Surat Omer, where is that? Where did you get that from? And I don't know. I just, I brought lots of, kvittelech to him with things that I had found in manuscripts, and I completely forgot.
So in a sense, Harav Kapach Zatzal was the first to quote Issur ve-Heter in his writings.
I suppose so. Yeah. I didn't know about it, but anyway, so that I hope that I've put that to rest. I published a note on this, and I think in the blog of Ezra Sfat was a Giloi Milsa is and then I put it in the English in the book for the Chabura, which came out around Shavuot time this year.
All right, Professor Harvey, do you have any questions, reflections, questions?
I gave a few interjections during the talk. I don't think I have any. I'm just very much looking forward to the publication of the text. It's a fascinating project.
And just Professor Langerman, returning to the point about Havdalah on Yom Kippur before Tkiyat Shofar, you mentioned that this is a practice that is not done in any community. would you see that there's any halachic problem with it?
Well, there are discussions about whether you can blow shofar before Mariv, where you have Atachon and Tana, where you make Havdalah in the davening. So there is some discussion, I mean, about whether, whether you can just wait because it's already obviously this fast is over, or whether you have to say Baruch HaMavdil Ben Kodesh L'Chol, or whether you discuss whether, before or after Tfilat Arvit, because which we do the custom everywhere I know now is before Mariv. After Ne'ilah, before Mariv, it's already so there is discussion I found about that, but as far as I know, no one makes Havdalah in shul over a cup of wine and then goes so far. Have you seen that?
What would be? I mean, once you make Havdalah, Yom Kippur is over. So what then would be the purpose of the shofar? Is that removing shofar from the service?
No. Shofar is not. It's not really part of the service. It's Zeker. If there's a Yovel year, then we slaves go free, but it doesn't. It's not necessarily connected. It's not part of the. It's not part of the davening. It's not something that is. It's not like the Rosh Hashanah where people talk about shofar blowing being actually part of the tefillah, the shofarot, and it's the Yom Kippur is just symbolic or a vestige or whatever. So it would just be that some people felt that you should do like the full even today the people who will say that even if it's well past Tzeta Kochavim and you've said Atachon Antanu, still don't do any work until you make Havdalah on a cup of wine. On every Shabbos, so some people held that. So I guess that's the thing. But it was interesting to me to see this, see this this custom listed, and also to see that there's this internal contradiction that he didn't notice that the ruling that he gave when he was writing on the basis of the Machzorim was not the same as the ruling he gave when on the basis of whatever halacha and minhag that he developed.
All right,
I hadn't heard about this, but I will have Hir Hurim Yom Kippur for the blowing of the shofar. I said I hadn't heard about this minhag, but now I'm going to have some compunctions before at the end of Yom Kippur with blowing of the shofar.
Well, as long as you don't blow, you just listen.
Right.
I just want to share here. This is the cover of the book, Perek Dinei Yom Kippurim, the chapter, The Laws of Yom Kippur from Issur ve-Heter. This is the title page, and we thank as well the patrons for the Institute for Jewish Research and Publications, as well as supporters of this volume. We thank you for your support, and we look forward to additional publications, both in Issur ve-Heter, as well as, please God, other projects. And thank you very much for everyone for attending today, and especially Professor Langerman for sharing your thoughts about the book. Thank you.